Okay, let's try and picture this. Ancient India, it's not just history books, right? It's a time the sources describe as having this real sense of unrest, almost a yearning.
Yeah, longing for something or someone.
Exactly. People remembered figures like Lord Ram, the ideal of righteousness, and Lord Krishna, with all the wisdom from the Bhagavad Gita.
Those stories were definitely still potent.
But the source material we're looking at today paints a picture where things weren't perfect. There was talk of dishonesty, inequality, a kind of ignorance spreading.
Right, and it's in that atmosphere, that sort of palpable need for guidance, that our main story really starts.
And this idea, it's interesting, this recurring cycle suggested in the source.
That societies kind of face the same stuff again and again.
Yeah, and that there's this anticipation almost for a major figure to show up and help sort things out. It really sets the stage for Siddhartha Gautama.
It absolutely does. It gives his arrival a kind of weight, a pre-existing context.
So for this deep dive, we've used a pretty detailed YouTube transcript. It's an episode called The Birth of a Legend.
And it's important to remember, like you said, it's not just dry facts, it's this mix.
A blend, yeah. Historical context, maybe some legend woven in. It gives this really rich picture of his early life, the world he was born into, the man who'd become the Buddha.
That's such a key point. When you look at these origin stories for major figures, it's almost always this combination, isn't it? Historical threads and deep cultural or spiritual meaning.
Understanding how they tangle together is crucial, I think, to appreciating the impact someone like the Buddha had.
Totally.
So our mission today, for you listening, is to kind of navigate through this, to really get a grip on those foundational stories.
The key events, the tensions simmering underneath.
Exactly. The things that set the stage for Siddhartha's birth. And it's not just some dusty old tale. It feels very human. There's drama, prophecy.
Pivotal moments, definitely.
Moments that shaped a destiny that, well, we're still talking about millennia later.
Okay.
Let's unpack it, starting with the kingdom.
Yeah, let's do that. So the source material puts us in Kapilvastu. It's in northern India, geographically near places like Magad and Vaishali, which were pretty significant.
And the timeline is important too, right?
Yeah.
This is centuries after the Mahabharata War.
Correct. A different era. The ruler here is King Suddhodhan. He's from the Shaki clan, and they trace their lineage back to the Sun dynasty, described as courageous, valiant.
And the transcript kicks things off with what it calls good news. King Suddhodhan had just won a victory against the Pandavas.
It's an interesting starting point, that victory. It kind of sets a scene of strength, maybe stability.
Yeah, almost like the calm before other things start happening.
Because that initial success, it serves as a backdrop, really. It establishes the king's power. But the story, it pivots pretty quickly to something more personal and maybe more pressing for the royals.
A lack of an heir.
Exactly. Which brings us to the queens, Mahamaya and Prajapati.
And the source really emphasizes their bond. Prajapati's affection for her sister, Mahamaya, seems really strong.
It does. And we learn Prajapati is dealing with her own infertility, her own pain there. But what's striking is how proactive she is, trying to make sure Mahamaya has the best chance to conceive.
That seems quite remarkable, doesn't it? Prajapati's efforts.
It's presented as very selfless. It sort of sidesteps the whole potential rivalry thing you might expect.
Right. Establishes this shared goal, at least, on the face of it.
Of course, the pressure for a male heir, that was immense in that society. To continue the line, both queens would have felt that intensely.
Which leads us to the whole omen and prophecy angle. This adds that layer of destiny,
Definitely. Guru Vanchaspati, the royal astrologer, he looks at the stars.
and sees something special.
An auspicious alignment, yeah. One that apparently mirrored the birth chart of Lord Ram, the great righteous king.
Wow, okay. High stakes then.
Very. And the prediction is that a specific veneration, some kind of religious practice or offering, could lead to the birth of a son.
But Mahamaya is a bit skeptical at first.
That's what the source says. Which is interesting, contrasted with Prajapati, who seems all in, really encouraging this veneration.
It does make you wonder, doesn't it, about what's really driving everyone. Pure selflessness, or maybe other things mixed in.
It adds a layer of complexity early on.
Absolutely. And then, right amidst all this hope and planning, we meet Devdutt.
Ah, yes, Devdutt, and the ambitions swirling around him.
Particularly from Mangala. She's portrayed as really wanting Devdutt to be named crown prince.
Which immediately throws a potential spanner in the works, doesn't it?
Yeah, introduces this possible conflict, a rival claim for the succession. That could definitely stir things up at court.
It's a classic element, that potential rivalry.
Right.
Creates dramatic tension, maybe foreshadows challenges for the prophesied child.
So after this veneration happens, Queen Mahamaya has this really significant dream.
The source describes it vividly. She sees a red lotus blooming,
And a white elephant. A majestic one.
believed to be Aravat descending from the sky.
Yeah. And the Brahmins, the priests, and Guru Vachaspati, they interpret this.
And their interpretation is clear. It's a powerful sign. She's pregnant.
And not just pregnant, but carrying a divine soul.
Exactly. The symbolism is potent. The lotus for creation, purity. The white elephant for royalty, divinity even. It really underlines that this isn't just any conception.
So the dream basically confirms the earlier prophecy. Things are happening.
It feels like a real turning point in the narrative, yes.
So the news gets out, the queen is pregnant, and, as you'd expect, big celebrations across the kingdom.
Huge relief and joy, presumably.
For the transcript specifically notes Mangala's reaction. It's described as almost too joyful, over the top.
And Prajapati notices this. She clocks Mangala's intense happiness with a bit of suspicion.
Which again hints, doesn't it, at maybe hidden motives, something complex going on beneath the surface celebrations.
Prajapati's observation definitely adds that layer of intrigue. While everyone else is celebrating the heir, it's a reminder that maybe not everyone in the palace has purely good intentions about this birth.
Makes it much more compelling for us, I think.
Agreed.
And this leads into something quite dramatic. The whole plot around the baby shower.
Right, this subplot introduces a couple of new characters, Lausika and Gopal.
And a pretty nasty scheme. Poisoned porridge. Intended for Queen Mahamaya.
Yeah, it's quite sinister, but the source focuses quite a bit on Lausika's internal struggle.
She's torn.
Very. Between her desire to marry Gopal, who seems to be behind the plot, and her actual loyalty and, it seems, affection for the queen.
That injects a very human dilemma into it all, doesn't it? Personal desires versus loyalty, morality.
It really does. Highlights the dangers lurking, even during what should be a happy time.
And then Devdutt gets involved, but sort of accidentally.
He inadvertently messed with the plan, yeah. Which leads to Lausika breaking down and confessing.
About the poison. And Gopal gets caught.
He does, and Prajapati steps in again, shows her strength.
Acts decisively against Gopal.
Swiftly and decisively, very protective of Mahamaya and the baby. It really shows her character again.
But the drama isn't quite over. Because then Mangala comes forward with her own warning, revelation.
Yeah, she brings up these astrological beliefs. Specifically, this idea that a child born after 10 months.
10 months gestation.
Yes. Could potentially be a threat to the father if the birth happens in the father's house.
Okay, so based on this belief.
She urgently tells Mahamaya she needs to leave Kapilvastu, travel to her maternal home, Devta, for the birth.
Now, Mangala's warning, framed as astrology. But could there be another layer?
You have to wonder, right? Is it genuine belief, or maybe another play to influence things? Perhaps ensure the birth happens somewhere else, maybe protecting Devdutt's potential claim? The mix of ambition and belief is tricky.
So the king, Suddhodhan, is reluctant at first.
Understandably, perhaps. But he eventually agrees. Mahamaya needs to travel to Devta.
And the story shifts focus then to the journey itself.
Right. And her arrival at the Lumbini jungle, the source really makes a point of describing its beauty, its serenity.
So moving away from the palace intrigue to this natural setting.
Exactly. A change of scene, maybe signifying peace, tranquility, setting the stage for the birth itself.
And then it happens, the birth. In the Lumbini jungle.
Assisted by Prajapati, Lausika is there too, and a midwife. It's described as, well, miraculous.
There's a sage present.
Yes, a sage who witnesses it is apparently filled with awe, makes these pronouncements about how incredibly significant this birth is.
And the baby is named right away.
Immediately named Siddhartha.
The fact that it happens there in Lumbini, outside the palace, that feels significant too.
Definitely adds to that sense of destiny, sets it apart. The sage's reaction just reinforces. This isn't just any royal baby. This is someone destined for something huge.
Okay, so let's just quickly recap for you listening. We've covered quite a bit. The kingdom's yearning for an heir.
The conception that seemed almost miraculous following that special veneration.
The threats and tensions bubbling under the surface during the pregnancy, that whole poisoned porridge plot.
Mangala's urgent warning based on astrology leading to the journey.
And finally, that auspicious, maybe even miraculous, birth of Siddhartha in the peace of the Lumbini jungle.
It's clear these early stories are just foundational, aren't they? They weave together prophecy, destiny.
With very human things like ambition, jealousy, loyalty, fear.
It's a really complex, rich mix that sets the scene perfectly for the extraordinary life and teachings that came next.
Which really brings us to a final thought, something for you to maybe mull over.
Yeah.
How do these early narratives, this blend of prophecy, court politics, personal dramas, how do they actually shape how we understand the Buddha, both historically and spiritually?
Yeah. What does this context tell us about the world he emerged from?
It's fascinating to think about this deep dive, getting into these very early events. It really is just the beginning, isn't it? The start of understanding a much, much larger and incredibly enduring story.